I'm going to hand over to Hannah Durant. Hannah is a member of the Resourceful Communities Partnership Governance Group. She does a lot of work in research-related areas with the membership. And she's a researcher at the Wales Centre for Public Policy. And she's going to be talking with you about the practicalities and principles around working with communities. So Hannah, if I could hand over to you, please.
Thank you, Sue. I'm going to share my screen if I can. Great.
Yeah.
I'm going to just quickly start by apologising. I've got a cold and quite heavily medicated. My already brain is struggling even more than usual. So I apologise for any lack of clarity. But thank you. Thank you for inviting me to join the distinguished group of speakers. And what the title that Sue gave me, co-production and research, principles and practicalities, I want to talk about through the example of some work that the Wales Centre for Public Policy has been doing with the Resourceful Communities Partnership. It's not at all to claim that this is the greatest ever example of research co-production, but I'm fairly sure it's not, but it will highlight, I think, some of the principles and practicalities of co-production and research and share some lessons and as a starting point for us to think about how we do better. So what I'm going to cover, if that sounds okay, just to briefly introduce the centre, the Wales Centre for Public Policy, to talk a bit about the partnership project with the Resourceful Communities Partnership. The focus of that project was on actions we can take to improve multi-sectoral collaboration that supports community action and community wellbeing. And then a little bit of a focus on the principles and practicalities of working together and some of the lessons that are largely from, in my mind, I'm sure colleagues may have others, and there are colleagues involved in that project on the call. So the Wales Centre for Public Policy is an evidence centre based at Cardiff University. I'm sure that's immediately very clear. We work to support Welsh Government and public services and community organisations, public services understood very broadly, and community organisations access and apply evidence to support their decision making, to support the changes they want to make. We're funded by Welsh Government, but also by the Economic and Social Research Council, which is one of the largest research funders in the UK, and by Cardiff University. We work to be responsive, so we work in ways which address the evidence needs of government nationally, locally, as well as public services broadly and community organisations, but in a way which is independent from those organisations. We're a team of about 20, and we have a mix of backgrounds within that team. So some have a research background, an academic research background, but some are also from civil service or public service and community sector backgrounds, as well as consultancy and social research. So the project that we have been working on with the Resourceful Communities Partnership, these actions you can take to support multi-sectoral collaboration and improve community action and wellbeing, that came from and responded to conversations within the Resourceful Communities Partnership and beyond about learning lessons actually from the pandemic about collaboration between public and community organisations to provide services and meet wellbeing needs. And those wider conversations over a really long period of time actually led us to collaboratively scope a research question and a research project to try to answer that question. What can we learn from the pandemic about how we improve collaboration? And the really important part of those longer kind of conversations to understand what it was we collectively wanted to know was that we were really clear that we wanted to look beyond the features of collaboration. So the ideal ingredients, that we need trusted relationships, that we need good leadership, that we need mutual respect and sufficient resourcing, and to get to how you get to those things when they don't exist and when they may be hard to achieve. So that long process of scoping really concentrated thinking about what it is we want to know and to scope the research. And then there was a second phase after we'd engaged with the kind of what does the evidence say? And I should say we looked at evidence from academic sources as well as grey literatures, reports that have been written by organisations involved in multi-sectoral collaboration, and also at practice-based case studies from across Wales. And then we also agreed that we wanted to understand the practicality of these actions. So to sense check them with people working in these collaborations. Do they make sense? What context do they apply to? Are these just not wrong? Are these just wrong? Are they not going to work? So that was the kind of structure of the project. And it led us to identify a set of actions that you can take in three broad categories: actions to support development of shared purpose and mutual understanding, actions to develop effective governance, so that's the roles, responsibilities, and processes and structures that you need to support effective collaboration, and then the mechanisms for financing effective collaboration. And again, you could probably organise these differently, and there may be more, but this is what came out of that review and that sense-making workshop. And I'm not going to focus on these findings, but more about how we went about it. So I'm going to talk about how we went about it. And to start with, I just want to talk about how the principles and practices that we employed were based around the principles of co-production research. Co-production research is a bit different from, but similar to co-production of services. It's similar in the extent that it stresses the kind of mutual and active involvement of research users and sort of equitable participation. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody doing everything, but it means recognizing the different mix of skills and assets within the collaboration. It's about the active involvement of research users. It's about those assets of knowledge, of expertise, of understanding, but it's also about the knowledge and expertise to analyze and interpret those findings and support the kind of what do you do with this information questions. And it's ultimately about improving the usability and relevance of research. So what we did, we collaborated to establish a shared question, as I said at the beginning. Those points of collaboration initially, as I mentioned, that kind of long process of scoping to understand what it was we wanted to know, what the focus within that research question would be. We held a workshop in December of 2022, and we asked people to contribute to understanding what it is we want to know collectively. And we also collaborated on the design of the research. How would the research be done? What was its scope, its geographic reach? Its do we want to look beyond certain types of knowledge? So what kind of evidence were we going to assemble in this review to understand our question? And again, we did that through the workshop and through polls with research users. We collaborated on the materials that were involved in the research. So it wasn't just about what we found and identified as evidence, but about what the members of the collaboration identified as evidence. So we asked people, what is it that you turn to when you want to know about how to improve multi-sectoral collaboration? And we assembled all of that literature together. And we also sent out a call for practice-based case studies, utilising those research users to access their networks to identify expertise and good practice in collaboration. And we also collaborated throughout the project. We agreed upon points of collaboration, really important points of collaboration, but we also reported formally and informally to the partnership, to the governance group, and to a steering group that we assembled that involved other academics as well as members of the Resourceful Community Partnership and wider community organisations. We agreed to look beyond academic research, as I mentioned, to look at other sources of evidence, and that spoke to the kind of plurality of knowledge sources needed in co-production of research. We agreed to look beyond the pandemic because narrow research questions are actually not very helpful for practice. So how does all of this work situate within wider evidence trends on how you achieve multi-sectoral collaboration? And we commissioned a team at Leeds Beckett University to lead that part of the review. We had a focus throughout on the relevance of what we were finding out for practice. So utilising case studies as a source, but also workshopping the findings with research users in order to understand the practicality of what we'd found out, and to really understand the context specificity of some of these actions, what works where and for whom, which is really hard and isn't really really easy to extract from other evidence sources. And to ensure that the outputs were action oriented. So again, we polled people about what kind of formats do you want to hear these lessons in, and what would work in terms of practical outcomes, practical resources for action. And so some of the things we learned, this is the final part. I'm not sure if I'm overrunning because I haven't set a timer. But just very quickly, so we learned about the importance of taking time up front and throughout to ensure that the research is needed, that it remains needed as things change, that it can flex within that scope that we agreed, that it remains relevant and useful. And part of that is about working out loud and repeat, sending, telling people what you're finding as you're finding it. So that people can adapt to what they're hearing and send you in a different path if you're going in the wrong direction. We learned about recognizing and utilizing the skills of everyone in the partnership and the strength and difference. So where does research, what are the skills that we bring as an evidence center, and how does that articulate with the skills of other partners? Their knowledge of other sources of expertise, their knowledge of how useful this is going to be, whether or not things you're finding out have any resonance. Focus on application to practice all the time. So asking all the time the so what question, which actually researchers aren't always great at answering. You need that collective analysis and interpretation. But we also learned about limited capacity. So all of that sounds great, but it's really hard to achieve. You're asking a lot of people outside and on top of their day jobs. So how do you not just take people with you from the beginning, but keep them with you as you go through the project? That can be really, really hard. And there were definitely points where people's engagement with the project had to ebb and flow. And that can be challenging when you get to the end and you feel like, to some extent, you've kind of left people behind at certain points, perhaps unintentionally. And that speaks a bit to how you go from research for to research with, and how far along that line we got, and how reasonable that is within capacity constraints. And also, I think finally, that what evidence does falls short of advocacy. So we have to hold the line to some extent as researchers on honesty, transparency, integrity of the research evidence, advocate for evidence, help people understand how and why evidence is valuable. But where does that stop, and where does advocacy take over? So I really apologize if I've overrun there, Sue, but that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you very much indeed, Hannah, and thank you for giving your presentation when you're clearly a little bit unwell. This is a great example, everybody, of a co-produced research project that's built in reflection at every stage, co-production at every stage. And although Hannah hasn't mentioned it, there have been over 80 people involved in the workshop. So sometimes we make assumptions that this measured step-by-step approach might be too much for people, but there has been tremendous amount of interest in that process. And I think having participated in it, I think we certainly enjoyed it too. So thank you very much, Hannah. We'll take some questions later on if that's okay. I'd like to now hand over to Mike Woods from Aberystwyth University. Mike is the director of Cymru Wledig Elpip Wales, which is, well, it's more than a project, it's a major program with the aim of empowering communities through research for a well-being economy. Very exciting, major funded project that Mike and partners have brought into Wales. So can I hand over to you, Mike, please?
Yes, of course. Let me just share my screen now. And hopefully that will now be full screen. Okay, so thank you, Sue. Thank you for the invitation to speak at this session today. And as Sue said, I want to talk a little bit about this new project, Cymru Wledig Elpip Rural Wales, and the work we hope to do through this on empowering communities through research for a wellbeing economy. And what I'll do is I'll say a little bit by introduction about the partnership overall, but I'm going to focus more on what we're planning to do in terms of working with communities and community-led research, and a little bit about how we kind of arrived at the model we're using, and a couple of reflections on that model. Just briefly, in terms of introducing what and who we are one of 4 local policy and innovation partnerships across the UK, funded by UKRI, the UK government's funding body for research and innovation, to support knowledge exchange with local and regional government, to strengthen community engagement and work towards inclusive, sustainable growth. For the first instance, we're funded for 3 years, which started in January this year, although this first 6 months has really been a setup period, and will run through to the end of 2026. And importantly, this is a partnership which brings together researchers at 4 universities, including CCRI and Gloucestershire University, and from a number of other third sector, public, private sector bodies, including Together for Change. And outside that core group, we're also then working with various strategic partners, and in the context of our community-facing research, local delivery partners in several parts of Wales. Overall, what we are trying to do is support inclusive and sustainable development towards this idea of a wellbeing economy within rural Wales. And we have a number of themes through which we'll particularly organise our work around building a regenerative economy, supporting a net zero transition, empowering communities for cultural recovery, and enhancing wellbeing in place, which perhaps is of particular relevance to members on this call. And the way we'll work is that each of those themes has a thematic group attached to it, which brings together researchers working in those areas, but also representatives again of various third sector, public bodies, community representatives, and so on, to share intelligence, to exchange knowledge, but also to identify gaps in evidence and new areas of research, which will then be fed into our delivery programme, which includes a number of work streams of different methods we are trying out in this programme. Some of the distinctive features, I think, of this approach is that we are, in that structure, creating a shell, an architecture to work, but we don't have a closely specified work programme. We're waiting for that to be filled by the thematic groups themselves, proposing topics and issues that we should be researching, and to doing that in response to emerging issues facing policy and delivery and practice in rural Wales. The second distinctive feature is we have a strong emphasis on equality and inclusion, and that includes holding workshops with engaging underrepresented groups to get their input into our work programme, and also mentoring individuals from those underrepresented backgrounds to participate in our thematic groups and innovation labs and on placement skills we're running. And then thirdly, we also combine regional scale surveys, research analysis across the whole of rural Wales with deeper dive studies with local communities. And through those, we aim to empower local communities to undertake and use research to address locally identified challenges. And that's what I'm going to focus on now. And the way we approached this was prompted by the brief, if you like, the funding specification we were given by the funders in UKRI and RI. And this engagement community is only one part of what they were looking for, but it's an important part. So the brief asked of this, it said examples of potential activities and outputs could include community engagement to co-develop and deliver projects, including establishing local citizen science and other community-led initiatives. And it said that overall, one of the aims of the programme was empowering local communities and enriching knowledge exchange practices, ensuring people and grassroots groups are engaged, listened to, and able to influence local agendas. Now, actually, that's quite sketchy, what's there. And we wanted to go beyond simply community engagement. You know, our previous experience working in rural Wales felt that we needed a better, stronger connection with rural communities. We needed to empower communities themselves and we needed to put communities in the driving seat of the research we wanted them to be involved in. We wanted to move away from an extractive model. So thinking about how we approach this, we looked at various examples. One of those came from previous work I've been involved in from Wizard as a Wales-wide research centre, and the programme, one of the particular work packages led from Cardiff, was working with a group in Barry on a citizen science project or a community science project about monitoring air quality and feeding into that discussions about the development of an incinerator in that town. The Rural Futures project, funded by the lottery and led by 7Y, which has worked in several communities in rural Wales on topics to address rural poverty. And the research there, it's not been an academic research project, it's been research being used in order to identify community priorities and needs and to engage community members in planning for community development through techniques like storyboarding. We also talked to people in Tir Canol in Mid Wales, who some of you will know kind of came into existence after the failure of a previous top-down rewilding project, and turned that around to actually engage community members in co-designing a new approach for sustainable futures. And what's very interesting about their approach is the way in which they try to engage communities, have community ambassadors, and so on. And finally, we also looked at Together for Change and the work that Sue and Jesse and others have been doing, and particularly for Ward's project and some of the lessons from that, some of which Sue has already identified. And through this process, we also invited Together for Change men to come on board and to lead this particular part of our work package. So what we are going to be doing is a community-led action research work stream, as I said, coordinated by Together for Change, and this will involve several steps. So we've just employed, our Together for Change has just employed their community research facilitator, and they will be engaging local community members to enrol participants, identify issues of local concern as a focus for research. They'll work with the community members to specify the aims of the project and to identify research questions, figure out how to do the research. At that point, we'll then bring in an academic mentor from the wider LPIC team who has matching expertise and on the topic area and in the methodology. And the mentor and the facilitator will then help the community group to design a research plan. A budget will be drawn up with a community organisation identified as a budget holder. Recruiting either paid or volunteer community researchers, that will be the choice of the community themselves. Providing training we've actually acquired for those researchers, and then taking the researchers through a process where they'll themselves be collecting that data using a selected method supported by the mentor and the facilitator. They'll be analysing the data again with that support, and then we'll take it back to the wider community and community members discussing and interpreting the findings and planning follow-on actions. It's in two phases. The first stage is about developing that framework in 5 pilot areas, which we've already identified and which all build upon previous similar related projects. And then alongside those pilot studies, we'll also set up a community research network open to all communities in rural Wales who might be interested in exploring community action research, and that will involve things like offering generic training and capacity building, following what's happening in pilot projects and learning from them, and beginning to think about potentially developing plans for community-led action research themselves. And in the middle of next year, we'll run an open competition in order to fund a further 10 projects who we can support in the same way that we're supporting the pilot communities during 2025 and 2026. I'll just finish with a couple of reflections on this model. As I say, we've put a lot of thought into how to construct this approach, and there's several things we wanted to achieve there. So these are a hope for benefits and anticipated benefits of this approach. It's intended to be a bottom-up approach in which the community's ownership of that research is not top-down, it's not extractive, it's not asking the community to fit in with a researcher's predefined idea. And as part of that, I'll be working on priorities identified by local communities, not those identified by outside researchers. We want to try to achieve the inclusive engagement of members of the community. And part of the answer to that we've learned from other projects is using community members themselves to engage and enrol other community members. We think this can also provide an adaptable and low-cost way of engaging academic expertise. In many communities, as Sue has mentioned, do look to universities and so on as potential sources of support, but aren't in a position to participate in some of the more conventional models for co-production and co-design, which actually require match funding and so on. I think the benefits of this approach, it involves community participants through the whole process, from thinking of the focus through to interpreting and using the results, but not just being brought in to contribute to, say, to data collection as officers of case and citizen of science. But as such, will develop new skills and capacities in the communities, and will leave the community with a resource, evidence, that they can use themselves. And that might be using that to identify and implement their own solutions to a challenge, or use it as evidence support bids for external grant funding from the lottery or others, or indeed as evidence to lobby councils or National Resources Wales or the Welsh Government or other bodies to take action on those particular issues. And then finally, there's still some anticipated challenges, which I think we will need to work through as we start doing this work. There's a challenge, obviously, of building trust and relationships in communities in a short period of time. The challenge of involving members from all parts of the community and not just working to benefit a clique who show interest and show up. The challenge in turning broad issues and concerns which community members might have into specific feasible research questions. Of overcoming skills gaps in communities, to equip those community members with the skills to undertake that research effectively, maintaining interest, enthusiasm, and momentum, and then avoiding conflict both within the community and potentially between the community and an academic advisor ourselves, and finally managing expectations. And I was struck by Hannah's last point that evidence does not equal advocacy, and that's one of these things. Now, hopefully, actually, these may be a resource to communicate and then use for advocacy, but that's not our role as the LPIT itself. We are supporting research and actually also being realistic about what getting that evidence might then allow that community to achieve, and recognising that's only a step towards taking that forward towards realising a wellbeing economy. So I'll stop there, and thank you, Sue.
Thank you very, very much, Mike. This is a fantastic project, and congratulations for bringing in a major grant into Wales. It's really putting Wales on the map in community development related research. I think what's exciting about it is this broad thematic base, which is flexible enough for policy and practice to determine the detail of it, with communities playing a major central role. And it's a really good example of co-production. And of course, there'll be that support there for capacity and capability building as well. Great project. And so much work has gone into this already to make sure that it's co-produced, everybody's on board. Definitely it's on the right track, and we're certainly very excited about it. Now, I know that Mike is doing the rounds to any organisation that is interested in getting involved, knowing more. Don't want to put you on the spot, Mike, but I know that if anybody's putting some requests into the chat, that you will respond to it positively, because there's been so much excitement generated by it in Wales. Thank you very, very much for an excellent presentation. I'm sure there'll be questions later. I don't look at the chat function at the moment, because normally when I try and do multiple things, I lose everybody. So I'm going to leave doing that till later, and perhaps ask Jessie and Kelly to keep an eye on it too. I'm going to now hand over swiftly to Tom Avery from Swansea University. Tom is from the Local Challenges Office that is setting up an infrastructure to support the local community groups in research and evaluation. So, Tom, could I hand over to you to describe to us how Swansea University is involving communities in place-based research and evaluation?
Sure, I'd love to. Can you hear me and see the slides there all right?
Yes, thank you. Everything's
Great.
perfect.
Okay, so hi everyone. It's really nice to be with you this morning and hear the first two talks. It's really interesting how so many different groups around Wales are getting involved in this in a real kind of tangible way. And we are all taking slightly different approaches, so I'm sure there's a lot of room for us to work together and learn from each other here. So at Swansea University, we've been interested in this area of reaching out to communities for the last few years, really. And this started with a few projects that we ran in our local communities, really in light of the UK Levelling Up White Paper, which, as I'm sure many of you are aware, has a massive emphasis on place-based approaches and working in places to develop the economies, social well-being, this kind of thing. And two of the projects we ran at Swansea University, before my time here actually, were Connected Communities and Pride in Place. So working to really listen to what the people around the university in our region were thinking and saying, and the challenges that they were experiencing. This eventually coalesced into a couple of internal and external projects that we were running. So we had the South West Wales Engagement Framework, which was really an internal mapping exercise that we conducted. My colleague Emily is here in the chat and she'll be answering questions a bit later, but she and her colleague Jo project officers for the Local Challenges Research Office, and they went across our faculty to identify the partners that we're working with and the kinds of projects that we're involved in. I did the other side of things, so I went across the southwest of Wales talking to different organisations, anybody really who is gathering place-based evidence, working with communities across the region to get a sense of what the challenges were there as well. And I guess the fruit of all that work has ended up being the Local Challenges Research Office. We're not entirely fond of the name, it's not really locked fully in, I guess. But it says just what it says on the tin in terms of what funders and what university researchers are looking for. But we're looking to change that, I guess. But what we're looking to do really as a small team across our university is look for ways in which we can be really, really involved and present with communities, learn what existing work is going on and find ways to kind of leverage the expertise that people across our university and other organizations have to really coordinate more strategically some positive change in the region. There's lots and lots of really, really good work going on that we've been learning about, but there's always more to do. So that's kind of the background to what we've been doing. Part of what we found from talking to people over the last year, really, and I'm sure that these will speak to what you're noticing as well in terms of higher education institutions and research, there are these 5 kind of ways in which universities tend to work. So they do tend to be research-led. If an academic has a particular research interest, they'll be able to pursue that and get funding to do that, which means it tends to be very funding reliant, so that projects are within a certain period, and that means they are necessarily temporary. And it's quite difficult to build research projects which have a lasting impact. That's come up as a repeated kind of a concern from people we talk to out in communities and in charities, but also internally a frustration that lots of our researchers express to us. It can turn out to be very transactional, like we'll do this for you, you do this for us, we'll work together to do that. And place ambivalent, often it doesn't necessarily matter where the research happens, as long as it happens somewhere. And this is something that comes again and again with people we're talking to. I absolutely think that there is a really positive and good place for this kind of research, but the way that things are moving, I think there is a resistance to this and a move towards working more in a local way. So we are trying to encourage a different way of working really across our institution. And these are kind of the values that we are putting together and that we've developed with our partners. So rather than being research-led, we're looking to see how we can make research across the university more community-led, how we can make everything we do more sustainable, to be in it for the long term, and that means beyond funded research project time. So there aren't really mechanisms in place to do that at the moment. So we're exploring how we could make that happen. To make things more relational, so that we are, as a university and individuals within the university, better neighbours and can be accountable to the region as a long-term, meaningful and personable relationship, and how to make things place-based, which here means tailored to specific places and all the different unique ways in which those places shape the people and the people shape those places. So no two places are alike. You can't just copy things across from one to the other, right? We've been developing a model for how we think this will work, and we're starting to implement this in a few different projects that we've got. There, underneath the three subheadings there, you can see a couple of examples of how we've done this. I don't have time to go into details of what those are, but generally, there's these three pillars of the ways that we're trying to work, and they are educate, co-create, and advocate. Educate really is about mutual education. It's about shared understanding, and before doing anything, spending real time to get to know the people that we're working with, to get to know the place, and to listen. So to educate ourselves in a way, but also to use our own capacities as academics, as researchers, people working in the university, to bring in our more macro level understanding of evidence, statistics, everything that kind of describes a place or could be applied to a place. So we're really bringing together those different understandings to educate each other and to get a shared understanding of what an issue is in a place, or what is already happening, or what we could do before doing anything else. I see that as foundational to the second pillar, which is co-create. Everything that the Local Challenges Research Office aims to do is around co-creation. Not to say that co-creation is always the best way to do something or is appropriate. We recognise that local people will want to participate.
Could I ask you to put your microphones on quiet, please?
I think that's someone in the room with me, I'm afraid, Sue.
Oh, is it?
Sorry.
Right.
So I'll just have to continue for now.
Yeah.
So co-create is about, gosh, where was I? Yeah, so different communities will want to participate in research or in action in different degrees. So we're not necessarily saying that we will want to co-create everything with everyone all the way through, but we want to respect what is already being done in places and to identify ways in which we can add value to those, ways that we can be led by people in those areas and join in kind of as part of that community rather than coming into that community and then leaving. And the last one here on the right there is advocate. We understand from the conversations that we have that people aren't always willing to participate or in a position to participate, particularly people from more vulnerable groups. I do a lot of work with refugees and asylum seekers, and co-creation isn't always appropriate for people in those situations. So advocate is about building bridges, about using evidence and supporting people to have their voices heard in places where they might not always be heard, and to, I guess, advocate for ways to speak to people in the ways that they speak, rather than kind of going and saying, we have had terms like hard to reach, right? Where it's actually about us being hard to reach, right? We want to be being and speaking in ways which are appropriate to the people in communities beyond the people we normally speak to and who understand the language that we use. We want to be advocating for that as well. So that's the model we've kind of put together and we're trying to apply going forwards. The last slide I've got here, it's around next steps and key lessons, I guess, how we're going to take this forward. I think the biggest lesson is that everyone we speak to is really kind of hyper aware that it's very common to be working in silos. People at local councils, people across the charities of the third sector. Lots of people speak about how we're doing our work here. We're so busy working in our practice that it's difficult to have that awareness of what other people are doing. We all hold different types of evidence that maybe people aren't using in the ways that maybe they could, or we have an example coming with the next presentation, I think, about how charities and other organizations could be using and sharing evidence. That's something that's come up again and again. So I guess we're looking to see what we can do about that in our region. And the ways that we think that we're going to be able to do this are really about institutional research culture and changing the ways that we see this. So a key part for us, I think, is to see how we can actually embed our university and the different capabilities that we have in local places. So it's not necessarily about bringing people to the university or having people from the university in individual projects going out, but how can the university as a whole kind of be present in a place as a neighbour, as part of that community in a more long-term way rather than a transitionary way. That would lead to a much deeper engagement and a kind of an expectation that we're not just there for the research projects, but we're there as part of that community to be experiencing what goes on in that place and to be part of it, and to see from that more long-term presence where the issues are, where we can work together to do something different, or to bring people together in a way that we haven't seen before. That must come from a place of shared understanding. So we're very, very keen to stay as listening partners throughout this, rather than always taking the lead, in a way that is reliable and in the way that is positive for the region and the people that we're working with. So we're working on how to develop this and how to do this. It's quite easy to talk about it in this kind of space, but when you start to think about how you do that across a large research organization like this, and how to change culture, there are just ways that people speak and ways that people are used to doing things, which make this really quite hard to do. So we're exploring how we can change that research culture at the university, at Swansea University, and ways that we can learn from the people that we are living with as neighbours most of the time, but not always talking to in a way that is productive. So yeah, that's us, the Local Challenges Research Office. You're very welcome to get in touch with myself or my colleague Emily, who's with us today. I have to shoot off to go and pick up my children fairly soon, so I might not be around to answer questions, but Emily will be happy to. And I don't think I said, we are working kind of substantially in the area between Pembrokeshire and Port Talbot. It's not a strictly defined geography. If people are in areas around that, we won't discount working with them. But roughly speaking, that's what we're seeing for now as our local region. I guess the Swansea Bay City Deal region. So very nice to meet you all. And I think that's my time. That makes 12 minutes, Sue.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. And I know you want to get off quickly, but just to thank you very much. A really interesting model where that relationship that is being developed with communities is intended to actually impact on the research culture across the university. It's a exciting, far-reaching agenda there. Tom, before you go, if I could ask you please to put the link to the Pride in Places study into the chat function, just so that people can see what you've been building on, because I know that was one of the first pieces of work that really influenced this agenda. So thank you very much again, and I look forward to Emily joining in with the discussions later. But I'm going to move swiftly on to our last speaker, Dave Horton. Dave is actually an associate of Together for Change, but the piece of work he's going to describe to you is in partnership with Cardiff University. He's been working with Anna Skeels to build a research partnership very much from the bottom up, using the grassroots interests and needs to work towards a particular structure that may serve the community well, initially in Cardiff. So could I hand over to you, please, Dave, for your presentation?
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here with you all. I can't see my presentation now. Bear with me. Can people still see that?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant, lovely. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, Sue. So my name's Dave Horton. My background is as a community development worker in the west of Cardiff, in Ely, where I've been working for kind of 18 years. So I kind of come at this not from an academic perspective or background, but from a background in community development, and in particular, developing co-produced research through a project called the Kaya Heritage Project in Ely. So I have a long-term relationship with Cardiff University, but coming at it from a kind of community background. My colleague Anna is here with me from Cardiff University. I'm actually going to ask Anna to introduce herself in a minute and just tell us just a tiny bit of background about Spark, which is Cardiff University's social science research park, which is the kind of the context in which the third sector research partnership has been developed, which is a project I'm going to tell you a little bit more about. So Anna, are you happy to just say hello and just tell us a tiny bit about Spark?
Yeah, thanks very much. So if people don't know, so as Dave said, it's actually the first social science research park ever, as far as we know, based in Cardiff University. And it's quite a unique collaboration. So in the building, we bring together a number of quite sort of high profile, significant research centres, Wizard being one, which has already been mentioned today, but also others that people might have heard of. So Cascade, that focuses on research, particularly on children and social care. We've got a new research centre that focuses on adult social care, Decipher that focuses on public health research. Fundamentally, we're bringing these research centres together with what we call member organisations, so non-academic organisations and partners, which could be public sector, private sector, and relevant to today, third sector organisations, and with a strong sort of belief that forming that kind of cross-sector community and sort of collaborating is really at the heart of a successful and impactful research addressing key social challenges. The third sector research partnership, I guess, began a bit before I came into post, which was January last year, and a sort of initial steering group had been formed, and as Dave's put up here, the aim to kind of help to enable a sort of vibrant third sector research culture, and that really sort of recognising, as people have already talked about before, the existing strengths and skills and capabilities within the third sector around all sorts of, I guess, knowledge that's important and relevant for research, but also going back to Sue's original comments about sort of limitations in terms of capacity, thinking about, well, what can we do? How can we be a sort of proactive partner, and how can we kind of engage and support third sector partners, particularly the smaller third sector partners, as we said initially, within the kind of immediate environment of Spark, so Cardiff as a whole. Is that enough, Dave?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thanks, Anna. Lovely. So that's the background of Spark, and you've seen the definition of the third sector research partnership, and you'll see within that there's a number of kind of key concepts behind our thinking. So we're interested, as some of the other presenters have been, in co-production and what that means in reality in terms of developing equal and reciprocal relationships between academics and communities. And in that sense, we're interested in working with communities at the point at which they're most organised, i.e. through their own organisations and groups, where they're coming together to actually make change on the ground. We're interested in making research and knowledge that's already available and evidence that's already available to third sector organisations, small third sector organisations. And we're finding that's more of a challenge than we expected, to actually put the evidence that exists in the hands of people who can make use of it on the ground. But that's a key aspiration of the project. Related to that, we're also very interested in, for us, co-production ultimately is about what kind of knowledge we privilege and what kind of knowledge we see as important and that we privilege. And for us, that means valuing community knowledge equally to academic knowledge, the kind of knowledge that exists in communities. And that includes lived experience. It also includes the sort of networked knowledge that exists in communities and people's local understanding and perception of need, but also of aspirations and assets. So we're interested in developing the research skills alongside those organisations on the ground so that they can engage in their own research and evaluation. And we're interested then in what happens when you bring those two different types of knowledge together, and what happens when you co-create knowledge in communities, and in putting that knowledge in the hands of people who can actually make use of it on the ground for change. So we're very much a strength and asset-based approach that we're looking at. We're influenced by co-production thinking, but also asset-based community development. And we're also very interested in how this speaks to the civic mission agenda within Cardiff University. So Cardiff University, I suspect, like many universities, is going through a kind of drastic thinking about its strategic direction in the context of funding challenges and a number of other difficulties and challenges, but also opportunities. They're thinking about what it means for them to exist as a higher education institution in the city. How do they relate to wider civil society? So we're interested in speaking to that, and we're interested into piloting an approach that is equitable and fair in engaging with communities and enables communities across Cardiff to benefit from civic mission activity. So at the moment, there's a couple of sort of flagship projects that Cardiff University will talk about, and we want to learn from the lessons of that, but spread out the opportunities provided by the Civic Mission Agenda to other communities. So just a little bit about the third sector organisations that we're currently engaging, because they're really an interesting and very dynamic group of organisations that we're working with. There are currently 6 of them. We're looking to bring in a second cohort later in the year, probably a roughly similar number of organisations. They're all of them either small or medium third sector organisations, which means they have an income of between 10 and £100,000. All of them employ staff, but often only 2 or 3 sort of small teams of staff. And interestingly, for us, they work in some of Cardiff's most disadvantaged communities. So we're working with organisations that are on the ground, working in communities of place that experience poverty. So we're talking about communities in Cardiff that are on the index of multiple deprivation, refugee and asylum seekers, people with mental health challenges, people in the LGBT community. So a number of communities that would be marginalised within the city, and we're able to connect with them on the ground. We've picked up some of the strengths and the challenges that these organisations are facing, and no one would be surprised to hear that those are similar to others that we've heard already. The strengths and opportunities are that these are organisations that are on the ground. They actually have roots in communities. They're long-term presence in communities. They're in contact with people who have lived experience in a meaningful way. People who are participating in these organisations with lived experience. They have local knowledge and skills. They carry a long-term passion and vision for their communities, and actually in a position to make use of knowledge to make change on the ground. The barriers, as we've heard, are a lack of resources and capacity to engage in research. In some cases, limited skills, but actually one of the things we found, which is interesting, is that there's a number of people in these organisations who either have a research background or who have engaged in research in academic settings. And that's been very interesting, some positive experiences, but some more challenging experiences. And I think the thing we'd flag up alongside these other challenges is a cultural difference between these third sector organisations and higher education institutions. And that's about the types of knowledge that are valued. It's about the extractive nature of some research, the sense that there's information and evidence being taken out of communities and not developed with communities. And the sense that some academic work is quite distanced from the practical use of that knowledge on the ground. And we want to bring those two things together. So what have we actually done? I'm going to talk a little bit about the practical approach that we've taken, because I'm hoping that will be of interest. And it's slightly different from some of the other approaches that have been taken. We've actually engaged the third sector organisations through participatory and creative workshops primarily, and also one-to-one conversations. And through that, we've explored in quite a creative way the organisation's aspirations and interests and the role that research might play in activating their vision. The strengths and assets that they already have in the organisation in relation to research, but also in relation to their community work. Previous experience of research, good and bad. Their support needs. The honing into research questions and possible methodologies of their aspirations. So we've actually done some work really firming up research questions, understanding what makes a good research question, and understanding the types of methodology that they might be able to use. And we've taken an approach where we are using what we call a canvas for each organisation. And I'm going to show you an example here. I hope you can see that. It's an example of an organisation called Grow Cardiff that's engaged in community growing projects. And you'll see that we've taken people through the workshop, through this journey, which they've plotted on their own canvas, which basically, the idea of this gives a single visual picture of their aspirations, some of the key challenges and issues, their own assets that they bring to the table, the partners they need to gather around the table themselves, and the next steps towards creating their own research projects. And the idea is this creates a sense of ownership for the organisation. It's something they can take away and they can build on and create, and it's a kind of living document, if you like, related to their research aspirations. So that's been really useful. And from those research canvases, we've created specific asks for academic support. And we've been done some surveying within the university, asking academics whether they would be interested and able and willing to provide pro bono support to third sector organisations. And we have about 40 people willing to do that. And the period we're now in the project is linking people up with pro bono support. So we're currently in the phase of matching people up with academics, and nurturing these relationships is proving absolutely crucial. So we're learning a lot about what makes for a good relationship between an academic and a third sector organisation. So the pro bono support will be delivered between now and the autumn. It's flexible around the needs of the third sector organisation. And we're also integrating this with a program called the Civic Insights Program, which is an internal program within the university that places students. And we've got 4 students that we're working with who are carrying out 35 hours each of literature review work for the third sector organisation. And this is about accessing previous research, making evidence available in a usable format for organisations, and enabling them to locate their work and their research interests in the wider academic context. So we've got some quite considerable amount of time from students and academics coming together with third sector organisations to plot out and begin these research relationships. Just very quickly before I finish, I'm going to run through a few of the research topics that people are looking at because I think they're of interest. So we've got one organisation working with the university to explore how you can develop a whole school approach to children growing food. So that's about embedding in the curriculum community growing and how we might teach children to grow food. We're doing some work with one organisation around understanding the impact of a previous scholarship programme that they ran for young people. So that's more of an evaluation research project. We're working with an organisation to explore the impact of drag performance on people with learning disabilities, which is a really interesting and unusual project. We're working to understand the impact Holocaust education on anti-Semitism. So that's going to be looking literature review into previous projects and the impact on anti-Semitism. We're working with another organisation to explore the significance of access to a physical space at a refugee project and the impact of access to that space on the integration of asylum seekers and refugees. And finally, understanding how physical design of neighbourhoods impacts on issues of antisocial behaviour in a local community of place. So a number of really grounded issues that are being explored, that we're bringing academic expertise together with community expertise to try and understand better and to try and make use of for change. And very finally, our next steps, we're looking at, as I said, at how we use this to influence the civic mission, and we're keeping a very close eye and engaging in conversations at a level in the university. We'll be co-designing these relationships as we go forward and the whole project really is a co-design project based on relationships. So the idea is we'll be nurturing these relationships and trying to develop them into longer term research partnerships and research communities that will develop longer term research projects. And that will require looking into funding mechanisms, how we enable funding from a university side, but also linking with the funding sources that third sector organisations themselves can access, and bringing that forward into a community of practice that continues to meet and continues to learn together about how these relationships could work effectively in practice. I'm going to finish there, Sue, because it's 3:05. I'm hoping that wasn't too long over. And I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you. And what a great example of a bottom-up project, building it from the interests and the strengths of the community and matching those to the offer from the university personnel themselves. A really great project, and it's progressed massively, hasn't it, over the last 2 years. Really, really interesting. The other point I wanted to make is that often we make an assumption that universities chase the money and that they don't do anything without a grant, but 40 academics offering pro bono support, it just shows that there's a real wind of change in terms of the partnerships and the possibilities in working together in the research environment. Great presentation. Thank you very much, Dave. Well, I'm now we've got about 20 minutes left, and I'd like to open up to comments, discussions, questions from the floor. So if anybody wants to chip in, please do. And I'm going to have a quick look at the chat as well, and perhaps Jessie or Kelly can highlight to me any questions that are there, because I see that there are 34 comments that have already been included. I can see that you've all been quite busy talking to each other and communicating with the presenters. So would anybody, I can see Sue's hand up, Sue Leonard. Sue, do you want to
Yes, I've got loads of
Start us off.
questions. I've got loads of questions, but I'll start off with the first one. So it was something that I think a couple of people had mentioned about communities often feeling that research is extractive, that they're, you know, they're giving off their time and their ideas, and then that's taken away from them, and so extractive. But then I think Dave said that actually they were experiencing some difficulty in encouraging people to take ownership of the evidence. So I just thought those two things sounded. I don't know if Dave could just expand on what were the difficulties.
Yeah, Anna might want to come in on this as well. But one of the slight challenges we're facing is that, of course, a lot of the evidence is available through journals that aren't accessible to you unless you're in a university setting. So it's literally a practical thing of
right.
Of having
not a cultural thing then.
No,
Practical.
that's actually really quite a practical kind of potentially quite a straightforward problem of journals not being accessible unless you're either able to pay for them or have access through membership of a university institution. So that the irony being, of course, that some of that includes research which is being conducted in communities who then can't access it themselves because they don't have. So that's one of the things we're exploring through the project, is how we tackle some of those actually some quite practical issues like that, possibly through membership model with Spark or other. I don't know if Anna wants to mention anything in connection to that.
Anna, would you like to add something?
I mean, I suppose just to reinforce which I think a lot of people have said, that this is kind of looking at both sort of access to evidence and research that's already out there and sort of better enabling that, and then, as we said, sort of new collaborations on research. And yeah, I mean, I do think what we're trying to do is think about what are the existing mechanisms within the university through which we might mobilize that existing evidence. So Dave mentioned the civic insights work experience students, but these are very short work experience placements, so we'll supervise them within Spark. And I think what they'll they can't do a sort of systematic literature review, but they can add capacity in some ways for third sector organizations, and as long as we keep it very focused, and they can share some evidence. And then things like rolling sort of master's students on different courses looking for sort of projects and things that they're going to work on. Is that another opportunity? And we've currently got something, I'm sure there are equivalents in other universities, that it's, I think, a knowledge evidence mobilization placement and secondment scheme or something, where like a partner and an academic can apply for a pot of money to cover costs to I guess to collaborate slightly longer term, and I don't see why that can't be focused on sort of accessing existing evidence that academic has generated to help get it more into those sort of third sector or community based groups. So, and I guess that links back to the sort of sustainability principle that a number of people have mentioned, in terms of the more we can build it into structures, mechanisms, processes that we think will be ongoing within the higher education environment, the better it is. So I think we're going to try and test out a few of those.
Thank you very much. Delis Williams has put into the chat that the inability to access journals is a long-standing barrier, and that communities of practice is in fact a good idea that could get around that. So that's thank you for that comment, Delis. Any other questions or comments, please?
I've got my real hand.
Right, okay, yeah, please fire off.
I just think it's really interesting, and I know you're looking at this, Sue, anyway, but the kind of the commonalities and the sort of recurring themes, that have come out. And and I think Hannah's point was really important about in terms of the academic approach focusing on evidence rather than advocacy. But obviously academic outputs can be used for advocacy by third sector and community-based organizations. And I suppose I just, as people were talking, I just got this real sense of sort of momentum or this kind of bank of evidence on well-being and communities that's kind of coming out through the different conversations. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just interested in people's thoughts around how to connect those up and making it more than the sum of its parts. But you know, that might be a later discussion, I don't know, but just to chuck it out there.
I mean, I just want to add, you know, my background was in setting up the research infrastructure in medical research, as you know, and we went about things very, very differently to what's happening now with communities, because we had quite a bit of money. We said, these are the policy imperatives, come to us with collaborative bids to set up research development groups, work across the piece, and make sure that the type of studies that you pursue will benefit patients. Because of course we know that if patients are involved in randomized controlled trials, their outcome is better, even if they continue being, even if they're ill, even if they're not getting the drug, they're in fact feeling better. So what we're seeing here now is a real vibrancy in an infrastructure developing across Wales to different models. And in a sense, that's exciting, I think, because that provides almost like a natural experiment as to, you know, what are the outcomes, what are the impacts of these different structures? And yet at the same time, if we don't collaborate, I think we miss an opportunity to share. You know, all the things that have come out in these presentations about the need for a repository of information, the need to know who's doing what so we don't duplicate, you know, all these things are really, really important. Yet the process, there's nothing wrong with the process being different. I mean, our conclusion from our research was that action is needed here, not just by the institutions that are doing this, but in amongst the statutory sector and amongst government to actually support this development in such a way that we work in a coordinated way and we don't simply, I mean, there's no such a thing as treading on toes because we're not competitive with each other, but certainly if we do join forces, we could probably achieve even more in the long term. You know, so it's an interesting question, really. And I think that perhaps we should look at today's session as a start to that discussion. It is awesome as to what's been, in my view, in what's been achieved in the last couple of years, and the energy and the commitment of the universities, that civic duty that's coming through is really impressive, and we need to build on it long term. I know the Welsh Government is interested in what's happening. R&D had hoped to attend today, but they've got a policy meeting that they're unable to get out of. And I think that it's important that we let them know the content of this session, and also these common issues that are coming through that are both very specific, you know, that are specific to our individual areas and our projects, but also are emerging as common issues across Wales. So yeah, I mean, I'm as enthusiastic as you are, Anna, and I think that we should look at today as the start of a process. Michael, could I hand over to you?
Yeah, no, very clearly coming back. I think both in response to those comments and Dennis' comments in the email, I think in the chat, I think often we talk about co-production working communities, we focus on the actual design, the implementation of the research. And I think what this is highlights, we need to think also about what happens to the research subsequently. And to pick up on the point you made, I think, you know, access to journals is an issue, but it's only part of it, because part of actually is that journal articles aren't usually written with the purpose of communities use their feeding back the purpose. So even with access to it, it doesn't necessarily help. And I think although increasingly those kind of publications are freely available open access, I think that's becoming a bit of a cop-out. That PDF can say, well, actually, it's an open access publication, anyone can see it, and therefore I've done it. I don't need to do anything else. And I think we need to think about how we communicate back to communities in different forms. Repositories share this information we mentioned, and also thinking the model we're trying to use of saying, well, actually, the community itself has ownership of this, decides what it wants to do with the research outcomes itself. The challenge there actually comes back to HEIs, is that too often it's seen, well, from an academic point of view, that a piece of research isn't actually worthwhile unless it results in a academic paper. And I think getting over potentially that hurdle of thinking out other ways you might be able to do research which is very valuable to a local community, but doesn't necessarily translate into that, and recognise that as being valuable.
Yeah, I think a great point, Mike, and I see that Hannah has put into the chat that in fact we should be looking at disseminating through various ways, creative, including journals, you know. So I think it's in keeping with the point that you're making. Absolutely. I mean, transferring knowledge into action has been a sticky point, hasn't it, for years and years. But I think that we've got to work hard at that. And also, I think if research is embedded in action research, then there's more chance of it making a difference. It's actually getting it into policy and making a difference there that is a particular challenge in my view. Jessie, can you come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I think you've just raised the point actually, which was about it's a very exciting landscape, and there's clearly amazing scope for contributions from across the sector, really to improve well-being for people and for the places that we live. But I think in that shift from something sort of research being that more sort of extractive model, I think you touched upon it, is that action research is really the way of being able to create that sort of actionable, relevant approach to research, but which enables agency for that particular community. And I think that's where, at the heart of it for me, is about research, skills, knowledge, creating a sense of agency to be able to engage in some of those kind of more policy-led strategic conversations. So I just wanted to say that I think it's quite exciting thinking about the way that the LPIP community-led action research will work, because it is very much a collaboration between the communities driving their own agenda with their own action-orientated focus and the higher education sector. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Jessie. And I see that Gwendolyn has put a comment into the chat, that the co-production network, talking about repository of knowledge that might actually help and, you know, progress some of the discussion that we're having here. Hannah, Sue, is that a legacy hand or is it a new hand?
New hand.
New hand. Well, let me go to Hannah first and then come back to you. Hannah.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I was going to raise something that you've just touched on, and Jessie as well, which I was struck in all of the presentations that everyone gave, that there was something that everybody didn't talk about but was really obvious, which is that we're not just talking about research being of value to and making itself useful to communities, to community organisations and public services that work to support communities. It's about the knowledge mobilisation role that is sort of hidden in all of those kind of cases that was described. So I just wanted to say, we should probably recognise that role, and then we need to talk about how it's funded, how it's resourced, how it's acknowledged, because none of the projects that we've talked about today don't include that glue, that sort of interlocutor, that role that is translational, is working between the communities. And I think, I mean, it was really apparent in what Dave and Anna were presenting about the amazing work that Spark is doing to create a kind of research support network, but it wouldn't function without the integrative work that they provide. And I think actually that's been a lot of our work with the Resource Communities Partnership, has not just been about doing some work that the partnership wanted, but spending that time translating, understanding, speaking, building relationships, really, really understanding, not just, you know, a quick commission, as it were. So how do we talk about that knowledge mobilization role and recognize it, and then worry about the how do we enable it to happen?
And in fact, a really good point, Hannah. There's been quite a bit of work done on, you know, how organisations can have dedicated named people as I think they were used to be called boundary spanners, weren't they, who could actually have a role in that. I fear that there's little resource for that, but definitely somebody at senior level identified for that role could actually help in big organizations. Sue, and I'm going to hand over to you, and perhaps if you could put the last comment or question to us, because I'm going to close the meeting, which has been
okay. Just a couple of comments then. So the knowledge mobilization point is really important. I did say in the chat higher up that in Wales we're really fortunate in having a good network of county voluntary councils across the whole of Wales, working at grassroots level with voluntary and community groups, and that partnership between CVCs and HEIs, I think, really needs to be strengthened. So I can see in Spark, that the Cardiff CVC was involved in that. I was really pleased to see that. But we do have these opportunities in Wales to build partnerships much more easily than perhaps in other parts of the UK. Second comment was that I was also struck, the speakers been really interesting this afternoon. But I was struck by lots of similarity, really positive similarity in terms of co-production, building capacity, building capability, and wanting to be inclusive, creative, engage with people who don't always get their voices heard. So all of that's really positive. But I just, I was sort of quite overwhelmed actually by the amount on offer, and thinking, we really need to communicate that in a way that's going to be accessible to people. So if I was working with, if a town and community council approached and said they wanted to do some engagement work in their communities around or a research work around action learning in their community, it would be great for me to be able to say, right, these are the links we can pull in to help you with that piece of work. So I don't know whether there's any way at all we can organize it regionally. Otherwise, I think the danger is that all these great projects are going to work in silos, and then we're back to the same problem again. So I think that collaboration. And then just one final thing, Sue, if I may, we had a really interesting and exciting conversation this morning. We were talking about most significant change as a narrative-based evaluation method. And we were looking at the role of artificial intelligence in terms of being able to help us to analyze lots of written feedback. And I just think that would be something to look at in future. How can we make AI tools available to communities to assist them in their analysis of any evidence that they collect? And I think, you've got the tools, you've got the experience, the expertise in the HEIs. How can we share that with communities so they can get their hands on some good stuff that will help them out?
Thank you very much for those observations, Sue. And you gave a rather nice summary that I was going to give at the end of the session, which is about the commonalities across the projects, and also, the danger that we're going to work in geographical silos. But I actually like to go back to a point that I made before, which is that this is the start of a discussion. We can make sense of it collectively. And if there's anybody here on the call still who's interested in those discussions, please let us know so that we can start drawing a community together to discuss some of these challenges in making sense of this in such a way that we all benefit from it, and our communities, of course, benefit from it. So all that remains for me to say is to thank the speakers very much. It's been a really stimulating afternoon. I'd like to thank Kelly as well and Jessie for organising the session, and ask you that if you've got a little bit of time tomorrow afternoon, join the RCP programme. We thought we'd chosen a really interesting topic around campaigning and the history of protest. And at the moment, it's not particularly well signed up to in terms of numbers, which has really disappointed us because we thought it was quite an exciting, radical idea. So if you'd like to join us tomorrow afternoon, do sign up. We'd love to see you again. And thank you very much for joining the meeting. Have a nice rest of the day. Take care, everybody.